Do enough people have green skills? The short answer will be not enough.
I think nuclear as a sort of baseload power source is going to be really crucial as we take the next steps in the energy transition.
We're more or less looking at, hydrogen, green hydrogen as an option or as a meat, to try to help decarbonize those processes.
Welcome to the Society for the Environment EnvCast, where we feature special guests highlighting an environment top 5 each month. Each month, we welcome 2 environmental professionals to explore what they believe to be the top 5 things to consider within a particular topic. Topics range from climate to leadership, agriculture to AI, and everything in between. Look out for some curveballs in the top 5 each month, and remember, we can't cover every important thing within a topic. Our aim is to uncover how you can be part of the solution, to learn from the experts, and to sometimes think outside of the box as we strive for a sustainable future. Enjoy the episode. Hello and welcome back to EnvCast for another Environment Top 5, this time focusing on that little odd topic of net zero. My name is Phil, I'm from the Society for the Environment and your podcast host for today. As always, we will be having a good chat with 2 registered environmental professionals and exploring key topics from different perspectives to expand our collective knowledge and make more impact. For this episode, we are aligning with Net Zero Week in the UK, which is running from the 5th to the 11th of July 2025. To look into the top 5 things for professionals across sectors to consider in and around the topic of net zero, we're joined by a registered environmental practitioner and a chartered environmentalist. Their biographies are in the podcast description, but as an extremely short introduction, I'm very pleased to be joined by Jenny Stein, who is a chartered environmentalist via their membership of the Institute of Environmental Management and Assessment, which is also known as IEMA. Jenny is the head of Net Zero Enterprising Cumbria, seconded from Sellafield Limited. So she is bang on theme for this podcast. It's like we thought about it or something. It's very good. And the thought process doesn't stop there. With our second guest, we are joined by Kelo Uchendu, a registered environmental practitioner, also via the membership of IEMA. Now, Kelo is net zero consultant at Mott MacDonald, and in June was announced as the highly commended finalist in the Rising Star category at the 2025 SocEnv Awards, no less. So, a very warm welcome to you both.
Hello.
Thank you.
Very nice to have you here. So let's get straight into the top 5. We will alternate between Kelo and Jenny for the first 4. Then the final item is for them to agree on as a top thing to consider for net zero, a key takeaway for our listeners. So, number 1, I'm going to hand straight over to Kelo to talk about green skills with my initial question. Do enough people have green skills? But first, tell us a little bit more about yourself and Mott MacDonald for a bit of context.
Thank you so much, Phil. My name is Kelo, like you mentioned, and I work with Mott MacDonald Decarbonisation and Energy Transition team as a net zero consultant. And Mott MacDonald is obviously a large multidisciplinary engineering consulting firm, and my remit of my team is looking at large-scale infrastructure decarbonization, but also supporting cities and local authority to rethink the local energy journey and support them in their net zero journey. And to give a very short answer to your question, do enough people have green skills? The short answer will be not enough, no. And when we look at the scale and pace of changes that needs to happen for us to meet net zero, one of the key recurring challenges that we flag up is skill gaps and skill shortage. Finance is always mentioned, but skill shortage is one key one that has not gotten the necessary attention needed to actually speed up the transition. For context, to put this in context, the Climate Change Committee proposed that by 2035, about 25% of homes in the UK need to be installed with heat pump. And this obviously increased to 80% of homes by 2050. to achieve this alone, we need to upskill 10,000 people to be able to deliver this alone. So when we look at this scale and the pace, you see that there is still a huge gap in trying to ramp up this ambition and to be able to deliver on this net zero commitment. And a lot of organizations, also local authorities and clients has been, raising awareness about these issues. How do we make sure that, we are equipping young people, but also the whole society to be able to transition to green, to greener career pathways and to be able to build these skills that help deliver on the net zero promise. And I think ultimately the responsibility rides on, what I consider to be the key duty holders to be able to deliver this promise. And one of them is employers. I think employers have, a key role to play to lead this transition. And one of them is, opening up the space. It can be degree apprenticeship or apprenticeships that support young people. Does not necessarily go through the conventional university route, but to be able to come into the industry, to be able to get on the job, real world experience, and to be able to translate that into a meaningful career within the green sector. But also not just employers, the educational institutions also have a key role to play, and by aligning their courses, with the emerging net zero demands, and to be able to, start promoting green careers to students early on in their journey. Another key player that I think I consider a duty holder is also government. They should be able to fund and steer green skill pipelines, most especially in disadvantaged areas, to be able to create policies and environments, an enabling environment that support long-term investment in green jobs and green careers.
Okay, what an introduction. Yeah, there's lots to talk about there already. And net zero is obviously, it can be a tricky concept for a lot of people to get their head around. It's quite a big thing. But when you give examples like we need 10,000 more people to be upskilled just for the heat pump situation, that's quite a number to even get your head around. So whilst that gives good context, it still sounds very tricky, doesn't it? So, and obviously you mentioned a few key people that would have responsibilities for making this kind of thing happen, employers and government and so on. But in terms of the heat pumps, I suppose there'd be a lot of local self-employed trades and so on who'll be key to that as well. So they need upskilling, which I guess is where they need local support and so on.
Yeah. Obviously, the local supply chains also, it's very important. Making sure that we have enough skilled people to be able to deliver this. I more or less try to classify this into very much three categories. So one of them is the transition skills. So the technical skills, which are the people who have this hands-on experience in terms of heat pump installation, solar PV, hydrogen system, the people that have this hands-on skill to be able to deliver this. But also, we also need people with, the transversal skills these are broader cross-cutting skills like project management, digital delivery, and also be able to drive behavioral change. And then there is also the most important one, the transition skills, which are the skills which are the ones crucial to helping, people who are currently employed, within the fossil fuel high carbon industry to be able to transition to greener careers. Still on the heat pump example, the UK government is obviously planning to phase out fossil gas boilers by 2035. So to enable this heat pump to scale, you have to first phase out gas boilers. So people who are currently employed within the gas boiler value chain need to be able to upscale, to be able to, to transition to upscale, to transition to, other greener skills, which is the core of, just transition. How are we making sure that we're not leaving anybody behind? Those people who are currently employed within the current sector, fossil fuel sector, how are we making sure that we're providing, a means or a way for them to reskill and transition back to greener skills?
Yeah. And that transition, obviously, you've got those people on the ground doing the work, but I guess it's also a business model, because those businesses who supply energy and so on, they're going to have to transition quickly, and if they do it quickly and really well, then there's a business opportunity there, you'd imagine. But yeah. Jenny, what's the current situation in Cumbria, based on where you work, but also many other ideas?
Absolutely, I fully agreed that green skills is a really challenging area that we really do need to address to achieve net zero. And one of the challenges that local areas have, like in Cumbria, is matching up those demands for green skills with the employers. With the delivery programs, we have to upskill people, like the skills bootcamp programs, for instance. So what we need to do is work really closely to match up that demand with the supply of those green skills that we're going to need. And I think working with local colleges, universities, like University of Cumbria here in Cumbria, is crucial to addressing that skills gap. And I think the other thing that we sometimes forget as well is the next generation of people. Young people are so engaged with the idea of net zero, but working with schools to develop an understanding of what green jobs, green careers look like is going to be really crucial, I think, to inspire the next generation of workers.
Very true. There's a lot to do there. Obviously, there's a connecting the dots type scenario that Jenny briefly suggested there between that employer need and the skills that are coming through the education system, whatever that education system might look like. Because again, that needs to vary a lot depending on how people want to go through to their new career or first career or whatever it might be. So there's a huge amount to think about there. We could clearly have about 20 different podcasts on the topic of green skills. It is such a big area and hugely vital. But we're going to move on. This is a snapshot podcast, so we're going to move on to the next topic around net zero. So we're moving on to the topic of net zero opportunities within the energy mix. Not just heat pumps, mention heat pumps, but all sorts of different things. So the energy mix. And I'm going to hand over to Jenny. But first, if you could tell us a little bit about yourself, enterprise in Cumbria, and so on for context.
Yeah, great to be here and introduce myself. So I'm Jenny Stein. I'm head of Net Zero at Enterprise in Cumbria. We're an organisation that works with local authorities and businesses to promote economic growth across the region. So in the Net Zero team, that means working to support new renewable energy projects and to help businesses decarbonise. Prior to joining Enterprise in Cumbria, I've worked in the nuclear industry for 10 years at Sellafield Limited. So Sellafield Limited runs a nuclear site on the west coast of Cumbria, which is the world's largest decommissioning site. So it's a huge amount of expertise in nuclear in this area. And I think that new nuclear is going to be a really important part of the energy mix going forward. We've obviously got real key strengths in this country in renewable technologies, especially offshore wind with some of the largest wind farms in Europe and plans for new floating offshore wind, especially in the Celtic Sea. We also have strengths in onshore wind and solar. And I think there's going to be a real renewal of interest in developing onshore wind and solar. But the problem with these renewable energy sources is their intermittency. So I think nuclear as a sort of base load is going to be really crucial as we take the next steps in the energy transition. And whether that's the sort of large-scale gigawatt reactors like at Hinkley or smaller modular reactors, SMRs, I think all of these are going to play a part in making sure we've got that base load and we can ensure that we've got power when the wind's not blowing or when the sun's not shining. As well as sort of nuclear playing that part, I think whilst we're transitioning to a more renewable-based energy generation, there's two elements that we're going to need to think about a lot more in depth. And one is energy storage. So we need to get better at storing energy so that we can make use of those times where the wind is blowing and the sun is shining. So we've got energy available for when that stops. So whether that's looking at things like pump hydro schemes or other innovative solutions for energy storage, I think that's going to be really important. And then the final point is that we're going to need smarter grids. So we might be transitioning to a world where consumers have more of a role to play in managing the transition to renewables. So we already have plenty of people who charge their electric vehicle at home, and they might do that when the sun's shining and the solar panels on the roof are working really well. I think there's going to be greater flexibility around when we use power, with consumers playing a part in sort of balancing that grid as we go forward. So I think that's going to be really crucial, that the energy mix is going to change and we're going to have to adapt to that change in ways that are new to us.
Yeah, it's all a bit new in a way. One thing that's changed for consumers, I guess, is previously you used to get cheaper energy during the evening, depending on during the night, depending on what tariff you're on. Whereas now I'm on a renewable energy tariff, and now there's things coming in where they know it's going to be sunny or whatever it might, windy, whatever it might be. So they give you an hour in advance to say, we're going to have loads of energy at this point. It's going to be all renewable. Now's the best time to charge things and that kind of thing. So you get kind of those direct messages, but that's a different way of living, right, with energy, isn't it? So there's a
Absolutely,
shift in thinking. But at least those things are trickling through now, which is, I guess, quite good to see, right?
Absolutely. And I think things like that are actually quite nice, aren't they? It makes you feel a bit more connected to the natural environment.
You're involved.
You're involved in it. Yeah. And there could be also initiatives like, the battery in your house that stores the energy from your solar panels could connect back into the grid, or even your electric vehicle could help with that grid balancing at certain times. So I think, there's huge potential. And I think consumers are bought into adapting. I don't know how you felt when you get that notification through. Do you think, well, I can't actually use that now, but at least it gives you a chance to adapt?
We were excited that it was happening, but then we realized we weren't at home at the time. So we didn't really benefit at all. But these kind of things will happen, and it gives us the opportunity. It's like it kind of gamifies things in a little bit of a way, because you can start to try and make the most of the opportunities based on renewable energy that's coming through the grid. So there's obviously some challenges there to address. You mentioned the intermittent power and that kind of thing, and nuclear is an option, a key part of the way forward. But what can, apart from people looking out for cheaper energy hours to make the most of the energy, what can people do? I mean, I'm talking like professionals as well. How do they get involved, and how do they make the clean energy mix more of a benefit to more people, more of a mainstream thing? What does that look like?
I think that understanding of the adaptability is going to be crucial. I guess an interesting thing to come back to nuclear is the acceptance of that locally, where new nuclear is going to be developed. So I guess an understanding that at the moment that is a crucial part of our transition away from gas. So if we are bought into this ambition for net zero, then you might need to be more accepting to a small modular reactor in your area. I think it's an interesting question where that sort of public perception of nuclear power is at the moment. I think it's fairly positive, but obviously there's lots of different voices out there.
Okay. Kelo, at MacDonald, what's the energy mix situation, discussions with clients, that kind of thing? What's the current situation?
Something that we're noticing a lot when we work with clients, especially big industries or industries that have high process load, where conventional heat pumps will not deliver sometimes they have temperature over 200 degrees Celsius. And we're more or less looking at, hydrogen, green hydrogen as an option or as a meat, to try to help decarbonize those processes. We work with some local authorities where they have a lot of industrial hub or industrial clusters, and which makes their energy need quite unique. And obviously, the UK government have a hydrogen roadmap, but also hydrogen. It's something that is emerging as a key way to help industrial clusters or industries with high process rates to be able to decarbonize or move away from the conventional gas boilers, where heat pumps are clean energy will not be able to meet the high process, high temperature demand they currently have operating on site.
Yeah, lots of things to think about. One thing I'd like to point people towards is the renewable energy podcast that we had 2 episodes ago. So episode 2 of EnvCast for this series, go and have a listen to that, because that's all about renewable energy. So it might give you a bit more of an insight into what we're talking about in this particular subtopic. But we're going to move on. I'll put the link for that in the description. Back to Kelo for consideration number 3, place-based approach. What are we talking about here, Kelo?
Yeah, so the concept of place-based approach is, one, recognizing that net zero is not a one size fits all. For example, what works in Cumbria might not work in Cambridge, for example. So it's place-based approach basically tailors climate action to the specific characteristics needs and opportunity of a local area. It empowers the community's local authority to read the transactions themselves. And one of the things we've seen is, local relevance for place-based approach, where, solutions are usually more effective when they reflect the local geography, infrastructure, or social dynamics. At Mott MacDonald, we co-authored a report which was on with Net Zero Infrastructure Industry Coalition, looking at place-based approach to net zero. And in that report, we more or less identified 4 pillars that we think will be, helpful to drive this forward. And one of them is powers, partnership, platform, and people. On powers, it's more or less about devolution of authority, giving local authorities and community the legal and, financial powers needed to be able to lead climate action effectively. And, this includes obviously control over planning, transport, housing, and energy system. But also giving local authorities the long-term, flexibility and powers to be able to act. So this is very important for local authorities to be able to, inward and start to look at what are the key strengths, what are the key opportunities that they have with their communities, and how do they mobilize and channel that to lead transition. And this also helps create co-benefits to tackle, any of the priorities that they have. It might be for poverty, it might be, any of the social issues that they have. So in this case, transition to net zero would not just be about cutting down carbon or reducing carbon, but also creating up other opportunities to help address some other things they have within the local authorities. And then again, the second one is partnership. How are we building cross collaboration across sector with public and private sector, but also third sector organizations, national government, local authorities, and private sector? How are we strengthening those partnerships to be able to mobilize the finance and everything we need to be able to do this transition? One key example, that I like to mention is the Coventry Strategic Energy Partnership, where Coventry City has procured an energy partner, Aeon, to on a 15-year roadmap to try to transform the city energy landscape. So kind of partnership is something that I think is also very important for bringing private sector and public sector to be able to lead this transition. And also this helps address the key challenge of finance when you talk about net zero, because it's also one of the key challenges when you have net zero, and then you look at the cost to deliver this. Where do you mobilize this capital or CapEx to be able to deliver that? And then platform, or more or less data. So how are we creating accessible and integrated data platforms and systems to be able to support evidence-led decision making? Local data platforms to help track emissions, identify those opportunities and the benefits from the outcome. So this is also very important to be able to do that. And then lastly, on people, which is at the core of it, net zero must be about people. So people should be at the heart of the transition. So how are we ensuring that we are empowering people to participate, to be able to shape the decisions, but also to benefit from the outcome? It will also be about having areas that have maybe high rates of unemployment, or looking at other multiple levels of indices of deprivations. How do we make sure that we're using the transition to net zero to be able to bring these people on, to be able to help these people play a key part in shaping the decision, but also in benefiting from that outcome. So more or less to wrap it up, we need a national framework, obviously, but delivery must be local. It must be read by, it must be local.
Yeah, there's a lot to think about there. But if nothing else, engaging with the local community is a must. I got from that at every stage of the plan, whatever that might be, to get a good idea of what's actually happening in the community, what's good for the community, what works, what doesn't, and so on. That co-authored report with Mott MacDonald, is that freely available?
Yes.
So we can link to that in the description as well. Excellent. Yeah. Oh, I like this. This description is going to be long. Jenny, we're talking about place-based approach, and clearly you work in a local vicinity in your work, but I'm going to give you about 2 minutes. But if you wanted to add things, go for it.
Yeah, that place-based approach really, really chimes with me. I mean, what we've got to work with is our local strengths. So Cumbria has amazing strengths in offshore wind opportunities and its nuclear expertise, and in having a really skilled sort of manufacturing and industrial base. But we've got challenges as well. So we have got areas with those multiple indices of deprivation, got challenges of geography. Someone's put a big load of mountains, the Lake District, in the middle of our region, which makes infrastructure challenging. So no, we have challenges of connectivity and grid connection. But what really chimed from what you were talking about, Kelo, is the opportunities of having more power locally. So Cumbria is in a really interesting position. We're in a fast track for devolution by 2026. So the potential to bring lots of that decision making over adult skills funding, for instance, we were talking about the requirements for green skills and other initiatives, really gives us more power to make those changes that we need and achieve net zero locally. The other thing I want to mention is we talked about engaging people locally. There was a recent initiative in Cumbria called the Cumbria Climate Citizens Assembly, which was a group that's representative of Cumbria more widely, that came together to discuss the question of how can members of the population influence decision-making over climate-related matters. So this is a fantastic piece of work done by Shared Future CIC, together in partnership with lots of organisations across Cumbria, and really, demonstrates the degree of engagement around climate and rethinking how we can get involved and influence decision making locally. So fantastic bit of work, and I agree that engagement is really crucial.
Yeah, and engagement, leadership, influencing and so on, key part of being a registered environmental professional. So just going to give that a bit of a plug, but it's not all about your technical skills, but you've got to bring people along with you. And when you're talking about just local, place-based solutions, to get buy-in, you've got to have that set of skills to be able to deliver in that kind of way, which is very, very important. We're going to move on to number 4 of today's Net Zero Environment Top 5. Let's see if listeners can guess what it is before I say it. It's industrial decarbonisation. I wonder if anyone got that. But over to Jenny for this subtopic.
Yeah, thank you. And I think industrial decarbonisation is really important, because I think it can be forgotten when we talk about, new energy generation and how we're doing things in our lives differently. It might not touch on everyone's day-to-day life in terms of transport, what kind of car you buy and the food you buy, but the country still has, despite moving away from its industrial past, still got a really important industrial problem to solve. And, electrification is not always possible. So Kelo mentioned sort of hydrogen and the role that's going to have to play. And I think there are going to need to be innovative solutions to how we decarbonise some of our heavy industry. In Cumbria, we've got a really rich industrial heritage. So we have some fantastic sort of heavy industry that is really energy intensive. So from things like paper making, milk processing, through to, really specialised things like banknote production. We also, because of our dispersed geography, we're not one single industrial cluster where we can provide a solution there and it serves the needs of everyone. We need to think about what can be applied locally. So things like hydrogen are going to be really, really interesting to watch. We've got a fantastic project in the south of the county called Barrow Green Hydrogen, with Carlton Power working with Kimberly-Clark, a paper manufacturer, to power the paper mill through hydrogen, green hydrogen. And I think another element that we don't always talk about is the carbon capture and storage. So for industries where it really is very hard to move away from fossil fuels, or where there is going to be significant carbon dioxide generation still, what is our approach there? And there's some really interesting schemes across the country, including the Morecambe Net Zero project in Barrow and Furness, which looks at storing carbon dioxide from the Peak District cement cluster, transporting it all the way through to Cumbria, and then storing it in the gas fields in Morecambe Bay. So I think we mustn't forget that industry is an important part of the picture, and not just for decarbonisation, but also for economic regeneration of areas like Cumbria, which have perhaps suffered in the past from changes in industry, And we need to make sure, as Kelo said, that there's a just transition away from the sort of gas-based industries through to greener industries.
Yeah, I think I'm glad we've talked about carbon capture as well, because that's a big part of the mix, isn't it? I mean, my knowledge is limited, but industrial decarbonisation, you can't do all of that without producing some carbon or using some, whatever that might look like. Is that right? You have to capture it as well. And
I think so. I think there's some industries that are just going to be very difficult to move away. And I think cement manufacture is one of them. So the critics of carbon capture and storage might say, well, we don't need to do this. We just need to move away from producing carbon dioxide at all. But I think that there is going to be a place for capturing or even reusing carbon dioxide from industries where that isn't possible.
Clearly, the idea is to get as low as possible in terms of those initial emissions in the first place. And you mentioned innovative solutions. AI is about at the moment. What does that? How does that help? What kind of innovative solutions have you seen, Kelo? Are those kind of things happening? There's a huge amount of work to do in all of the industrial decarbonisation space, I think.
Yeah, obviously we're seeing quite some new innovative solution popping up, especially when we're working with clients, large industry clients that usually have processes that are hard to decarbonize. One key one that jumps right to my head is where we have a big factory that is obviously big open space factory that only needed to hit the workers but not the space. And having to hit the space will obviously take considerable amount of energy to hit the space because it's large, it's open. And then we are seeing employers using just battery powered jackets to more or less just hit drawers and not the space. And that's leading to huge carbon savings. So industries, they're probably one of the hardest. They're probably one of the hardest to decarbonize. But obviously, innovation is playing a key role in doing this. And we're seeing quite some bespoke, innovative processes emerging to help decarbonize, or help support this decarbonization. And as Jenny rightly mentioned when she was talking about the energy mix as well, there is also an opportunity where industries were using, like, if take talk of heat network, for example, where industries with large waste heat, are feeding that into a heat network and then using that to heat homes within a particular area. So that is also an opportunity and a kind of innovation where you have industries with process flows, but also with large waste heat, and then we're utilizing that waste heat, feed that into a heat network and use that to heat homes. So there are quite some innovative processes that we are seeing emerging around that, and and obviously over the next 30 years we will keep seeing rapid changes in how we will take industrial processes, but also in how we support those industries to transition and still remain competitive.
Interesting. Okay, I like the idea of wearable heat sources. That's a good one. But then again, I suppose I in the winter when it's cold in my house, I don't put the heating on. I do have a hot water bottle that sits on my lap just to keep me warm, which doesn't sound very innovative, but I am saving quite a bit of carbon by doing that. Whether it's health and safety conscious with all the IT equipment around, maybe don't mention that. But moving on to the final topic, the final item, which is the biggest takeaway you want listeners to be considering on the topic of net zero, whilst encompassing all of the things we've spoken about already. Who wants to start? What are we talking about?
I think the final point I want to focus on is we've talked a lot about reducing carbon, but the important point for me is about net zero is about more than just reducing carbon. It gives you more than the primary aim, which is to reduce the impact of climate change. And what it gives you is, it's about energy security as well. If we've got energy sources in the UK which can reliably power our homes, power our businesses, what that gives us is security of supply. We've seen with events in the world in the last few years that this is, increasingly important. What it also does is it gives us jobs. It helps us reindustrialize those places, those parts of the country where industry's been in decline. By bringing in those renewable power sources, you can bring in the associated industry that needs to use them, whether that's AI data centers or whether it's sustainable fuel manufacture. It can be the catalyst that helps us to reindustrialize and strengthen communities, especially where there is that deprivation. It also makes us healthier. Lots of the things we might do for net zero actually improve the quality of our lives in many other ways as well. Walking to work, cycling to work, these sorts of smaller activities really, can help create much healthier, nicer places for us to live in. And it helps us modernize our society. So I think we've suffered from a real lack of investment in infrastructure over the past 50 years. And I think what we're seeing now is an opportunity to invest in infrastructure that really sets our country up to succeed over the next century, really.
It's amazing what global events can do to change our way of thinking and give us opportunities to change the way we live our lives or heat our homes or whatever it might be. Kelo, over to you for benefits beyond just the decarbonisation side.
Yes, so just to double down on some of the things Jenny has mentioned, I think the fastest way to reduce energy costs for consumers is to speed up transition and not to slow it down. Fossil fuel prices are very volatile due to global market frustration. We see at the wake of Russian invasion to Ukraine what that costs to gas prices and energy prices across Europe. One of the fastest way to deliver to stabilize energy prices and to cut the cost and reduce energy costs for consumers is to speed up transition, because renewable energy have low and predictable operating costs, and it helps stabilize prices over time. I know in recent time there's been quite some political argument, that try to look at net zero, and I think the popular one is the net stupid zero argument, or saying that those arguments try to ignore, the economic and the innovation potential of the green industry. We look at any sector you pick, you look at how take a renewable energy industry, the solar, the wind, or the battery technology, how these are, outpacing fossil fuel in growth and employment across, most of the world. So you see that transition to net zero is, provides us with a huge opportunities and benefits because of the innovation and the economic potential that they offer. But also, just like Jenny mentioned, it gives you energy security. So it's the fastest way to try to reduce energy prices for consumers. So it gives us stability, and it also gives countries that, self-sufficiency to be able to generate, consume energies and not have to depend on sulfur that is prone to market frustration and external shocks.
So much to think about. I do want to now run a webinar or something, maybe a full event about the benefits of net zero beyond just decarbonisation. So much to think about. And I guess, so Kelo, in terms of your conversations with your clients, does the topic of the other benefits come up? Is that a key part of the discussion that you have with clients? It's not just about, meeting net zero targets. These are the added benefits.
Yeah, exactly. It's usually one of the key selling points clients want to see also is what other benefits do I get from this? Because most times there is usually significant CapEx upfront cost. But when you now look at some of the other benefits that comes with actually putting up this the capital, putting up this on our hand, it's that benefit, it's that multiple benefits and core benefits that comes as a result of the transition that is something that is also that makes it more appealing and makes it to be the most preferred option.
Yeah, really interesting to hear about. Anybody interested in the world of net zero and you wanted to make a pledge to your net zero commitments, I'm going to point you towards Pledge to Net Zero, which is a program that Society for the Environment helped set up. I will put the links to that in the description as well. This description is going to be quite long, isn't it? But we're going to finish our podcast there. There's so much more to talk about, but thank you very, very much to our guest today. We have covered a lot. If you, the listener, have ideas of what could have been discussed in today's Net Zero Top 5, let us know in the comments or send us a message. We're keen to keep the conversation going. Clearly, we can't cover everything in one podcast. But finally, please check out any links and resources in that pod description and you can keep on learning about the various things that we've talked about. But thank you, Jenny. Thank you, Kelo. And thank you again for listening. We'll see you in the next episode next month. If you've made it this far, please remember to subscribe wherever you're listening to this episode so you don't miss the next one. Also, rate our podcast and leave a comment to help us reach more people. Thank you very much for listening or watching on YouTube. We look forward to the next episode next month. See you then.